What an exciting time for your institution and for your leadership teams. You've applied and now you're getting ready to do that. You're an applicant, you're getting ready to do the candidacy process, and we are here today to help you be successful and understand what happens, what you need to do, why we do candidacy reviews, and how to support you and answer your question. So we're a relatively small group. You've got a couple of options if you need to ask a question. The best option is to put it in the chat. And if you'd like to put a question in the chat, feel free to use that. If you think this is a really important question for everyone, go ahead, feel free to unmute yourself. And when you see a little break, go ahead and ask your question. I sometimes give a little break and see if there are questions, but I will tell you up front, my wait time is deplorable. It's gotten better over the years, but I would engage in you with my classes and say, okay, any questions? None? Excellent. Let's move on. So use the chat, and you just stop the speeding train for a minute if you need to. We're going to get rolling, and our norms for this training are hopefully we want you to be engaged. We've got a couple of activities for you to participate in. And we want you, if in our breakout rooms or in this process, we'll be sharing best practices. You can be sharing best practices, generate questions. Someone did request a recording. We unfortunately will not be recording the session. We will provide you the slide deck. There's a whole host of reasons why we can't provide recordings for these sessions. One of which is that we've got faces on here, a lot of faces and voices and things like that. So we don't record them. All right, digging in. Our purpose for today is we're going to learn about what the purpose is of a candidacy review. We're going to share and talk about some of our resources that are available to support you in your journey. We're going to talk about the process of the candidacy review and definitely tell you how to prepare and be successful for your candidacy review. At this point, Nicole, I'm going to call on you. Anything you'd like to add before we start digging in?
No, we're good.
All right, off we go. Now, accreditation is composed of stages. And right now, you're in the big blue dot on the left-hand side of the screen. You are an applicant and you are in the candidacy phase. Once you've been successfully accepted through the candidacy review, you will move over to the salmon-colored dot. I think it's salmon, what it looks like, that says self-assessment. And that is, then you'll start preparing for the full engagement review. During that process, anywhere between 6-9 months, depending on the capacity of your institution, you will prepare a bunch of documentation and evidence. You then host a full-scale engagement review. And once you are successful in that, you'll move on 4 years later to a progress report. And then the next cycle starts again. For most of your institutions, this is a 6-year cycle. In some locations, it's required to be a 5-year cycle. And some of you who may be early learning, there are different requirements for QRIS. However, candidacy is outside of the cycle, and that's where we are right now. Once you are successfully through the candidacy review, you are considered a candidate for accreditation. And then you'll get the full accreditation once you go through the engagement review. All right, the purpose. Why do we have a candidacy review? Well, the biggest purpose is to make sure our institutions and partner schools are prepared, excuse me, and to see if they have the capacity to meet the Cognia performance standards. This is a scaffolding process, because if you were to jump right into accreditation engagement review, it is very rigorous, it is very complex, and it is very challenging. The reason we have candidacy is to prepare you for that full process and to make sure your institution understands where it needs to be in order to go through that big process. We want to learn more about your institution. We want to be able to provide you feedback and be a partner in your success, particularly in preparing for that full-scale engagement review. So we are going to get you through this candidacy phase. And it's like I said, what an exciting time to be going through this initially. We have a wonderful protocol. It is very, very well prepared. You will want, for this process and for the engagement review process, to put together a leadership team or an improvement team. This team is composed of, administrators or heads of institution, could be other administrators, could include teachers. It could include parents or stakeholders. It could include learners. It depends on where your institution is at. And for this team, you're going to be completing some activities that we'll talk about in just a moment that are found in your candidacy review workbook. You're going to collect information. You're going to pull together some evidence. One of the biggest tasks is to respond to the Cognia assurances. And we're going to show you exactly what that looks like. The assurances are our ground rules and our ground agreements that we're going to make sure that each institution agrees to and has capacity to meet. Then you're going to complete the candidacy workbook process. And then 4 weeks before your candidacy review is scheduled, you're going to submit all of your information. It can be earlier than that. It can be 8 weeks before it, but it has to be done at least 4 weeks before the actual candidacy review, because the evaluator will need to review that material. They're going to review the material. They're going to look at what you've done. They're going to ask questions. They're going to make sure that everybody understands what's going to happen and what's on the schedule. For the most part, for schools and systems, candidacy is on site. This includes if you're a digital learning institution, you're a school, what have you. The evaluator will be there. The exception is early learning. So if we have early learning folks, we do it backwards. Candidacy is conducted remotely, and then their actual engagement review is conducted on site with observations. Candidacy for schools, that evaluator will be there. So that's going to be part of our logistics. Pausing for just a moment. Nicole?
Nope, nothing to add.
All right. Moving forward then, we're going to start with a quick intro activity. When you are putting together your leadership team for the candidacy review process, what qualities would you look for in improvement team members? And we're going to launch a poll, and you get the opportunity to submit some responses and say, what kind of characteristics or qualities would you look for in your team as you're preparing for candidacy and then ultimately engagement review? And Nicole, would you like me to launch that?
Yes, that would be great. For some reason, I'm not co-host anymore, so I don't have the poll.
Okay. I'm hoping this is the right one. I am not the tech person. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it should say candidacy, I think.
I'm terribly sorry. Ignore that poll. Ignore that poll. Bill is not the poll launcher for the most part. Candidacy review training. Here we go. I think I got it.
Yes, this one.
What qualities? There you go. What qualities do you look for in improvement team members? And you can go ahead and respond at this time. We'll give you about a minute to do so. As you're thinking about that, they can, of course, remember it can be school leaders, teachers, stakeholders, learners. It's a complex task, and it depends frequently on the size of your institution, the capacity of your institution, things like that. All right, let's take about 15 more seconds. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and we're going to share the results. And here are the results. And I wonder if I can zoom this so you can see it a little better. I bet I can. All right, so we've got things like reflection of the system as a whole, longevity in the school, leadership roles, integrity and commitment, huge, dedication, loyalty, patience, attention to detail, absolutely, invested, organized, organization. You got to have someone who's crazy organized because this can get unwieldy real fast. Objectivity, absolutely, more commitment, leadership roles, insight. These are excellent. Team-oriented, good communication, diverse viewpoints, critical for moving a school forward is that diversity element and equity, familiarity with the school, absolutely leadership, and willingness. Sure. That'd be terrible. You've been voluntold to be on this team. I don't want to be on the team. That would make it kind of difficult. So thank you for those responses. Those are terrific. All right, we're gonna go back to our presentation. Thank you. We're going to start with some resources. And at this point, Nicole, I think you could probably, I'll share the screen if you'd like to talk about the resources, if you'd like.
Sure. So Cognia has prepared 3 main resources that are really going to assist you in understanding our standards as well as the protocol for the candidacy review. So this first resource that we have for you is the glossary of terms, and I'll put that in the chat in just a moment. So as you read through our standards and the associated rubrics, you may have questions about what particular terms within the standards mean, as well as what particular terms within the rubrics mean. And so we've given Cognia's definition for each of those terms. It is organized alphabetically. And then starting on pages 4 and 5, that's where you're going to see a chart that gives Cognia's definitions for those terms of frequency. And those really are related to the rubric. So one of the parts of the process will be rating yourself on the standards. Even though you won't use that same 4-level rubric for candidacy, you still want to have a sense of what does Cognia mean by consistently, frequently, or regularly, seldom, and so on. And so this glossary is going to be a very helpful tool for you in establishing that common language. Go ahead to the next slide, please, Bill. So this is what I was just talking about. So we do have those 4 levels of the rubric. Even though every standard does have its own personalized rubric, there are consistent terms within each of those levels. So you can see right here some of the common terms at level 4, 3, 2, and 1. And typically what we mean by that, so at level 4, what we're looking for is things that are occurring 75% or more of the time, or it's something that you can really show that growth and improvement over time. So you have results. Level 3 is something that's occurring 50 to 75% of the time. So it's something that does happen a lot, but it's not something that's happening just in some pockets of your institution. Most places that's where it's occurring, or many places. 2 is 25 to 50% of the time. And then level 1, that's less than 25% of the time, or that's a practice that's really not in place in your institution. I'm going to put that there in just a moment, Tazini. I'll put it in the chat. Okay, so the next document and this is going to be the most important one. We're going to be walking you through all of the steps of this process, but after today's training, this candidacy workbook is going to be extremely helpful for you in understanding the steps in the process. So the candidacy workbook really is your step-by-step guide. It walks you through the components and the activities that your leadership team is going to need to complete in order to successfully host your candidacy review. It is organized in chronological order, the order that we recommend you complete the steps. And then it's also an interactive workbook. So you actually do have the ability to type your responses into the workbook itself, and then you'll be able to transfer the information into the Cognia platform, which will be showing you at the end of the session. I'm going to quick put both of those documents in the chat so that you have them. And then we'll move on to the last one.
While Nicole is putting those resources into the chat that you can click on and then download and be able to access, I will tell you that workbook is step by step. If you are a concrete sequential thinker, this is your resource. You can start at the top and it will walk you through page by page in order of everything that you need to do. And there are lots of activities that are optional, but you'll get the essentials there for you to capture. So those resources are now in the chat. You click on them and then you'll be able to download them. Thank you, Nicole.
And two more things I wanted to add that you just reminded me of, Bill. So one of the activities you're going to be requested or required to do is the executive summary. In the back of the workbook, we have an exemplar executive summary that you can take a look at before you begin, as well as another activity you'll be asked to do is complete your reflections. And we also have sample reflections narratives in the back of the workbook. Okay, so that takes us to our final resource, which I've put into the chat, and these are the standards cards. So one of the key components of candidacy reviews is to really look at Cognia standards and see right now what your capacity is to meet those standards. So we've prepared these cards to really familiarize our institutions with what these standards are and then what they look like in practice. So each card or each standard has its own card. You can see right on the top, we've got the key characteristic, which we'll be talking more about what those key characteristics mean in a moment. But then you have the standard number and the text right at the top. The elements are on that top left corner, and this really describes what does that standard look like in practice. The rubric is right next to those elements. Now, one thing to note, in candidacy, you will not be rating yourself in the 4-level rubric. You'll be rating sufficient or needs improvement. But I do want everyone to know level 3 is what we would mean as meeting the standards. So if you read through those rubrics as a leadership team and you feel you are already at that level 3, then you would rate yourself as sufficient. If you're not at that level 3, you would rate yourself as needs improvement. The other thing that we have here is that sample evidence section. Now, in candidacy, the requirements of evidence aren't quite as rigorous as they are for the engagement review, but this is still a helpful guide for you, so you'll know what we will be looking for during that engagement review process. So don't worry if you don't have everything on that list at this moment. That's just giving you an idea of what we will be looking for. Okay, Bill, next slide.
All right. We're going to do an activity, and as a follow-up to the standards cards, I heartily recommend at one point somebody prints them. I have my set here. I staple them by key characteristic. There are 30 performance standards, 32 for early learning. But I print them out because you can annotate them, write on them, use them as coasters for your coffee or tea. I go through a set about a year. By the end of the year, they're so well annotated and scarred up and has coffee rings all over them. But it's a good idea so you can have it in hand. Certainly you can do so electronically, but take a look at Standard 30, and Standard 30 is growth and learning, and it is about a balanced assessment system. It's sad but true, but you know, our members of the professional training team have the standards memorized. In Standard 30, it is saying learners' progress is measured through a balanced assessment system that includes assessment both for learning and of learning. So we're looking at a balanced assessment in Standard 30. What are some items you would use to support your ratings. And we'd like to collect that information through a Padlet. And I believe that Nicole just put the Padlet link in the chat. I am going to click on the Padlet, and this is what it's going to show me. And you should see this. When you click on that link, we've got a big blue screen. And in this first column here, additional evidence to support standard 30. You can click on the plus sign and a box appears, and you can title it with a subject. And let's say, okay, I'm going to title this standard 30, but you really don't have to title it if you don't want to. And you're going to compose where it says write something beautiful. What evidence would I use to support standard 30? Well, because we have a balanced assessment system, I'm going to put in the assessment plan for the school. And that will include all sorts of information. And then I click publish. When I click publish, you can see that it pops up right here and we can see your responses. So looking at standard 30, what additional evidence would you consider including, and enter that information in the Padlet? And we'll give you about a minute. Once you type your response, make sure you click on publish. So we've got a response here about grade level assessments. Excellent. In addition, while you're working on that, grade level assessments, especially how it's aligned to the curriculum, are we assessing what we're teaching? Progress and monitoring assessments, that formative assessment process, critical, the schedule, the benchmark schedule, a comprehensive list of what assessments you use. Schools are incredibly data rich, and they can generate probably a pretty vast list of assessments they use. Individual progress assessments, that is very sophisticated. If your institution has got everybody doing a competency-based or individual education plan for every learner. Teacher training on assessments, good. It's not just for the learners, it's also for your instructional staff. Outstanding. We need to know how to leverage assessments, not only in administering, creating, but also interpreting that data. And just followed up by technology. Excellent. Data from assessment analysis. Yes, frequently. That's the point of assessment. What is it telling us? Effective action plans, diagnostic assessments, and pre-assessments forward. Absolutely. Helps you guide your instructional plan. These are outstanding. Very, very good. All right, let's take about 10 more seconds or so. Nicole, help me. How long will they have access to this Padlet?
I mean, they can technically have it the whole time. We do erase the responses because we reuse this Padlet for our monthly training. So,
you'll be able to access it for a little while, even after the training. So no promises, but if you wanted to get additional information or review this, effective action plans according to scores. Yeah, that's leveraging data. Teacher reflections for learning and of learning. Absolutely. Your reflections from an instructional point of view in teachers. How can I get better, or what can I do to be more effective? These are outstanding. Okay. I'm not going to close the Padlet. Feel free to keep entering it, but I am going to go back to the presentation. All right. The process. Dun, dun, dun. Here we go. This very busy looking slide is actually not as busy as it looks, but you're going to start in the candidacy by collecting some data and reviewing results. You're going to be completing some very baseline demographic information. You'll have to complete what we call the executive summary, and it's got 11 specific talking points. In your candidacy workbook, there is an exemplar that is absolutely brilliantly written for you to guide you as you go through that process. You can use that as an outline. Then you're going to go through each of the 30 performance standards, 32 if you're early learning, and say, are we meeting the standard or are we not meeting the standard, either sufficient or needs improvement? That's in the candidacy process. When you get to engagement review, you use the full rubric. This one is just meet or needs improvement. Do not have any remorse or feel bad if you are marking needs improvement for a bunch of standards. That's okay. You can still be successful in candidacy. I have seen institutions mark every standard as needs improvement because they're not quite meeting them yet in candidacy and still have a successful candidacy review because they are demonstrating capacity to meet those standards. So make sure you're doing a frank analysis of this. You're going to reflect on areas of strength, improvement, and challenges in short essays. And then you're going to complete the assurances, which we talked about at the top, but we're going to show you exactly what that looks like. You're going to review your responses and then transmit all of that information to the workspace through the diagnostic platform. And we're going to demo that for you today. But a real important step is communicating with that evaluator. What's going to be going on? How are you going? When are you showing up? How are you showing up? What are we going to do while you're here? That schedule is created collaboratively. So all of that information is going to be crystallized with your communication with your evaluator, and your evaluator for candidacy and engagement review is on your side. They are not there to play gotcha. That's not what we do. We want to guarantee your success. We don't get bonuses or stipends for institutions who, aren't successful in this process. It's collaborative. We want you to win because continuous improvement is important. When you're determining your institution's current reality, you're going to look at generally 4 types of evidence. That includes documentation, observation, perception, and performance. Now, remember, you're going to get a copy of these slides, so you don't have to jot or take pictures. We're going to give you these slides. But documentation includes things like, widely distributed material, frequently referred to as what most people think of when they think of evidence, handbooks, policies, and things like that. You're also going to have observation data available to you, like we went into learning environments or classrooms, and this is what we observed. Some of you have formal protocols. As members of Cognia, we provide you a learning environment observation tool to use if you so choose to. It's outstanding. Then there's perception data. You have surveys or inventories that you can collect. They are remarkable sources of information, and Cognia has about 60 of them that they provide to you as members of Cognia that you can use or not use, depending on what the needs of your institution are. And then finally, and this is important for many institutions, is how are the learners performing? How are they doing? How are your teachers performing? How is your institution performing? And that includes graduation, promotion rates, teacher retention, discipline data. Many schools in the United States have state ratings and things like that. How is your school doing on those pieces of information? All of that kind of information you're going to be required to have for a full engagement review, but there sometimes is limited amount of data as you move into candidacy because the requirements aren't quite as strict. When you're looking at evidence, more is not always better. If you have experience with accreditation, some of you may have experience with accreditation. Some of you may have even served on engagement review teams before. Many moons ago, several cycles ago, a team would come to visit your institution, and the first thing they received was what we called the three-ring binder of fury. And they would, boom, move this onto the table as the team arrived, and we'd start looking through the three-ring binder of all the thousands of pages of evidence. Quality evidence is infinitely more important. A single piece of quality evidence, such as analyzed assessment results, can be used for more than one standard. As you look at each standard and you're rating yourself, a single piece of evidence can be used for multiple standards. You do not have to create a unique list of evidence for every different single standard. That would be unwieldy, and it wouldn't be the point. We don't want you to do busy work. We want you to capture the reality of your institution. Not all evidence is relevant. At times we'll see things like, okay, here are the sign-in sheets from my professional learning for the year. Okay, I've got, 16 sign-in sheets. These are all names on a sign-in sheet that people attended. It doesn't really tell me anything except that it was attended. Summarizing or analyzing those sign-in sheets and saying, like 90% of our staff attended PD throughout the year in one sentence, that would be a bit more quality evidence. What kind of evidence demonstrates impact? Is this evidence making a difference in our institution? Key concept. I'm going to pause a moment. Nicole, did we have some questions in chat that I should address?
So I did address the question, but they just asked, do we have to describe each standard, whether it's sufficient or needs improvement? And so I had just said, you will rate every single standard. Now, kind of what Bill's talking about, in the candidacy phase, you're not necessarily collecting pieces of evidence or providing a rationale for your ratings for each of the standards. You're really just going through, and then your overall reflection at the end of the candidacy diagnostic will be talking about just what's going well and what needs to, or what your areas for improvement are.
Excellent point. Candidacy is essentially engagement review light. It prepares you for the engagement review. Remember, it's that scaffolded step, and the evaluator is just going to make sure that you understand and are ready to go through that next process. All right. The executive summary, which is one of the 3 diagnostics you must complete. It gives a holistic picture of your institution, and there are 11 talking points, or I'm sorry, writing points. It's roughly 2,000 words, 4 to 5 pages, and you will enter that information into the diagnostic. I'm going to strongly recommend, suggest, encourage that you compose your executive summary in a Word document. And that way you can simply copy and paste it into our online platform. And then you'll always have it available as well in that Word document. Good practice, good practice. And if your engagement review is within a few months of your candidacy review, you can reuse it because you need to write another executive summary for your engagement review. You don't have to write a new one. You can use the one because the things in the executive summary are not dynamic. They don't change a great deal. The executive summary are some constants at the institution. On your workbook on page 6, it does give you that information. And of course, there is the brilliant exemplar written at the back in the appendices. We're going to look at the executive summary. You can see the exemplar, or you can look at the writing points on page 6. What is your instructional model in your institution? And we're going to just do a poll about that. And Bill's got, whoops. Sorry.
I got it, actually. I was able to launch this one, Bill.
Oh, I was just about to end it. So in this poll, we have a couple of choices. It's Do you see it?
Yeah, right now it says poll ended.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was putting the poll in and pressing buttons, and I think you had pressed,
Okay,
I wasn't aware.
I'm
So
just gonna relaunch.
you relaunch that poll. It's going to ask, are you mainly traditional kind of teacher lecture format, competency-based, cooperative groups, project-based learning, fully digital? And then there's a question about to what degree is technology integrated into your model? By the way, this is sort of just like an FYI poll. We're not judging. There's no judgment here. I mean, you can have cooperative groups that are very outstanding and effective. You can have traditional lecture format that is outstanding and effective. Uh, we're just asking you to ponder that. I noticed also that we have not asked our institutions here if we have early learning representation. If you are an early learning institution, do me a favor and put that in the chat if you are, you know, toddler, pre-K, because I want to make sure you get resources because it's a little different.